The Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio. Warchant TV begins right now, and it's a fun one. They're all fun, but we're really happy to be here today. I can say that there is some gloating to do, boys. There's some conversations to be had that make fun of every other school in the ACC, as well as writers across this land. It will be fun to do so, but before we do, there's Ira, there's Corey, I'm Jeff, and yay, sausage! Thanks to our friends at Register Sausage.
You know, the great thing about this partnership with Registers, it's become so ubiquitous that now I was in two different places over the weekend where I almost was getting like chided for not having Register. I was in Publix and some guy's talking to this guy and he starts inspecting my cart. Hey, where's the registers? I was like, all right, man, I haven't made it over there yet. I'm going to get some registers. It's all right. And then I was at the ballpark at the softball game on Saturday, and somebody asked me if, just started asking me about Register. So do you really eat the Register sausage? Yes, we really eat the Register sausage. Yeah. It's delicious. You guys should eat it too.
Yeah, you got to have the Register sausage. I don't want, guys, if you see me out and about, like Ira there, you don't need to come up to me and ask me about sausage. Don't ask me. Don't look at my cart. I don't need you looking at my cart.
Yeah, you don't inspect the other man's cart. What are we doing?
It's kind of understood that when you're passing carts in the aisle, you're just like, good to see you, Bob.
Don't look down.
I'm not like
no
over
sausage.
there. Yeah.
No sausage checks in here.
Yeah, we're not doing sausage checks. That's a bridge too far, guys. It's a bridge too far. No sausage checks.
But go to registermeats.com and you can get all the selection of sausage you want. That's what we've done. Kim orders it off registermeats.com sometimes if we're not out in the store. But yeah, it's in the grocery stores really across the Southeast region. And Ben finally texted me back.
Oh, boom.
It took like 2 months. I think he proved his point. He's like Florida State in this lawsuit.
He did.
Mm-hmm.
Ben's like, man, I draw a line in the sand and I'm not budging. But listen, man, I'm like Florida State and Clemson too. I was, I didn't text him back. I just sat there and let it sit. And then finally he came to me. So now we're mending the fences. We're moving together, just like FSU and the ACC.
I guess. And the ACC didn't have much of a choice. They got brutalized in this thing. It's a good day. Well, look, we've all had our fair share of moments to talk about this, to write about it, to kind of inspect this, to learn, the fallout from what's happened. But for our listeners and our viewers, I said yesterday, Ira, when you came on the show, that I thought this was a massive one-sided victory for Florida State, Clemson, really anybody else that wants to leave this league, quite frankly. I think it was a huge win. And I really don't see the negatives. I get if you're antsy and you hate this league with a passion, you're pissed about the idea that maybe you got to stick in maybe till 2029, the end of 2029. But frankly, when we summarize everything that Florida State was asking for from the moment we learned of the lawsuit to where we are now, this is a 52-0 win for Florida State. If this were a game of football, nothing good came of this for the ACC. They basically just gave you a clock and a time to know when the league is over, when it's done. Now, they can merge with somebody else, and they can join the Big East or the Big 12, and then they could be like-minded people, whatever. But the league as we know it just got a death date.
Well, 100, I think the other way to look at for their perspective, and I'm guessing what Jim Phillips is, he's talking to the presidents of these other schools. And listen, those schools had to vote for it. Florida State didn't just impose this on the conference. Those schools had to agree to it. But the way they see it is somewhat positive for them is the fact that, they do get to exist, and 100% of, 35 million is a lot better than, 35 million is a lot better than zero, so the equal share. And listen, this is going to have ramifications across college football because listen, man, and I was listening to our friends, Pat Forty, Dan Wetzel, and Ross Dellinger, and I get some exceptions to take with some of the stuff on their podcast that they do. But, Ross Dellinger brought it up. Listen, you don't think Alabama and Georgia are looking at this? You don't think that they're saying, well, wait a minute. So why are Vanderbilt and Mississippi State getting the same amount we're getting? So it could have ramifications across the sport. But yeah, for those schools that are surviving, and if it comes to it at that point, guess what? Vanderbilt and Mississippi State are going to be like, okay, guys, we'll go along to get along.
Yeah, I think one thing would, yes, for sure. I think this could have a huge impact on the college football as a whole. Like, yeah, the same thing with like Northwestern, Purdue.
Right.
Like, why are they making the same amount
Rutgers.
of money as Ohio State? This has long been overdue, in my opinion, because Florida. I know, man. Look, man, I know the Jags and the Cowboys make the same amount from the NFL's TV deal, but there's only 30 of those teams, and the Jags have been competitive sometimes. Like, they've mattered. They almost made the Super Bowl. Vanderbilt's never mattered. Wake Forest has never mattered. And I don't bring eyeballs. So anyway, but back to the overall point of this day, of what happened on Monday is, and what's going to happen later today and the week and when it's finally approved is, I think I would push back a little about doing the victory lap, only because there were a lot of people that thought we were out of this league by next year. This guarantees you're in the league for 5 more years. That's not something that people are going to be overly excited about. We all understand why this is a really good deal for Florida State. We understand the Big Ten becomes available. The new TV deal becomes available in 2030. But when we've been hoping and talking about Florida State getting out of this league by 2026 for a year and a half, and then it gets pushed back to 2030, people, maybe not everybody's as fired up as they should be because of that. Because you've now cemented yourself in this league probably for the next 5 years.
Yeah, listen, I don't think that necessarily it's 100% submitted for 5 more years.
Right,
I mean,
right. But that's how it reads right now.
Well, right, and I get it, and like and it's not just about hating the ACC and feeling like it's beneath where you need to be. There are tangible impacts to that. You know, the ACC is going to get 2 bids if the proposal goes through for the playoff. The ACC is going to get 2 bids. The SEC and Big Ten are going to get 4 bids. So there, and then just in terms of how you're evaluated and how it affects you in recruiting, there are tangible detriments about being in the ACC. But I understand the initial concern, but if we're going to be adults here and look at the big picture and look at what the possible situations were, man, I never thought they were going to get this. And I'll be honest with you, I heard where the numbers were a couple weeks ago, and if I was Florida State, and this is why I'm a sports writer, and Peter Collins and Michael Alford and Richard McCullough, those guys are running a university, is because I would have taken that. And they didn't. And now here we are, and they're getting a much better deal. I mean, I thought they could get out maybe before 2030, but I never thought it was going to be economically responsible. I thought maybe they just have to kind of go crazy and mortgage the future to do it. And then even if they did, I think that's the other thing that's changed. Again, when you talk about what we were saying 2 years ago, I don't think any of us really knew how it would play out if they got on the open market. It's pretty clear that they were not going to get a full share if they got in the open market. Right. So if you combine those two things, yeah, man, if I was, if I was the Florida State people, I couldn't be much happier than I am right now.
Oh, I think if this were a movie and there was a camera in the room for the power players that we're talking about, there were hugs and high fives and toasts. They got pretty much everything they were asking for from the get-go.
Except out of the league. Except out of the league.
Except out of the league. But think about the money. Yeah, and also think about the money situation. Again, they're going to get – I just never dreamed they were going to get $15 to $20 million more a year, plus if they win.
Yeah, if they don't
Dellinger was saying, and I hadn't heard this number, it may have been out there, but with the Success Initiative, the way it's based, if you win the national title – or maybe just make the national championship game, which again, we're talking about a program that was 2-10 a year ago. I get it. But if you win a national title in the ACC, the way the Success Initiative is designed, it can be up to $25 million. So now you're talking about Florida State getting $15 to $20 million per year, plus in a year where if they get to that far in the playoffs,
just get to the playoffs.
If they just making the playoffs, I think it was $4 million. Yes. So it escalates each round. I mean, now you're talking SEC Big Ten money. I mean, it's way beyond what I
want to clarify. I'm excited about it. I thought it was a very good day for Florida State on Monday when that news came, and I think this is making the best of what has been untenable when you're trying to compete nationally. This is they got as close as they can to where they need to be. I'm just trying to present the fans' perspective that might be disappointed when they hear that they're going to be in the league till 2030. So when y'all are yelling at me, don't yell at me, because I'm just being Johnny fan, because you guys can't relate. You can't relate. Look at where Jeff is. Ira's always been on a high horse. And then here I am, the voice of the common man. So just treat me like a common man. Well, no, I didn't mean it to say it like that.
No.
Understand that's where I'm coming from, but treat me as the elite brain that I am.
I would say that one of the joys in the last 24 hours as this all played out was reading through and reading between the lines of the angst from so many columnists that have had this idea that, Ira, Corey, it's ironclad.
Yeah. What are we doing? 2036. Sorry you signed it. Sorry you signed it.
You dumbasses deserve this. This is what you signed up for. And now you're being a bad actor, and the ruination of college football is solely on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, that turns out that wasn't true. Turns out that it was never ironclad. Turns out that Florida State, acting in their own best interest because of an ever-changing landscape in college football that they didn't start, by the way, with the SEC raiding other conferences and ruining the Big 12, and then Big 10 taking 4 teams from the Pac-12 and ruining that conference. But it's Florida State's fault, sure. And Florida State got exactly what they wanted, save for being able to leave in an hour. But yeah, they got everything. They got pretty much everything they said they deserved. And their talking points turned out to be accurate and agreed to. Their public talking points about why they deserved more money, being responsible for 15% of the, all that stuff, and they were only getting 7%, that turned out to be accurate. And you know how we know it was accurate? The schools just agreed. Yesterday, they just agreed. Well, today, they're going to agree. They signed off on it. They just agreed to it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because we are recording this morning before the Board of Trustees meeting, the issue we would have had is the Board of Trustees meeting was scheduled for noon. It may go an hour or two, because that they're going to go in private session or in closed session to talk about the terms of the deal, which they can't talk about publicly. And we don't know how long that's going to take. So we're recording this morning. By the time people see this, it likely will have been done. It
can all be ripped from under us, and we're screwed.
The ACC presidents first had to agree to it or sign off on it, but from what I understand, it's a done deal. They just have to formalize it. The ACC has to do it first, then FSU and Clemson's boards will do it afterwards, and then here we are. But yeah, man, I would love to be a fly in the room. I would have loved to have been a fly in the room 2 years ago in May of 2023 at the spring meetings in Amelia Island. I was outside the room. I saw Jim Phillips have to go in there and try to break up the brawl. And then literally he had to come from where he was to the other side of the hotel to go in and just calm things down. I think somebody on the staff at the ACC was like, hey, you need to get in here, buddy, because Alford and these other ADs were going at it. And this was when Michael Alford and FSU were saying, listen, we want more money based on what we bring to the table. We should get it. You kill what you eat. This is not just we're not going to just get everybody gets a handout. We should get more. And they laughed at him. They mocked him. They gave him crap. They couldn't believe the audacity of him to do this. So I would love now, this May, when I'm over at Amelia Island, sitting in the, I would love to see, just if I'm Michael Alford, man, I have a hard time not walking in like Vince McMahon. I mean,
yeah.
It's pretty amazing the 180 in 2 years.
Over the years on the JCS, I've been crude at times, sometimes a little over the top, a little blunt, a little absurdist. But there would be moments where I would talk about this as you could take your pants off type of moment. This would have been one of those ones where if you're Michael Alford, you walk in, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and your pants are unzipped. And you're like, I didn't realize.
Just not wearing any.
I didn't realize. Sorry about that, fellas. Anyhow, good to see everybody. And then you begin the talking points, whatever they might be. You could start with like, it's good to see you, Boston College. Glad you came to your senses, and you will take $7 million less per, and maybe more if I decide to,
kick you out of the league.
Yeah.
Great. And when we talk about the big picture ramifications, listen, man, when the Big 12 failed because of this idea, the Big 12, Texas had their own network. They were, made more money than everybody else. That's why Nebraska wanted to leave, and everybody got mad at them. And that model, that's kind of always been the stick when schools have squawked like this in other conferences. And, and everybody always said you can't do that because the league won't exist that way. And I get it. But the reality is for Florida State, the ACC doesn't need to exist for 20 years. It just needs to exist for a few years. It's not like those schools have agreed to it. They're going to be mad, man. In 2 years from now, those schools and people, they're going to hire a new head coach who's going to be like, what? Why are we getting, $20 million less than Florida State? And there's going to be frustrations there. But at the end of the day, it's just the realities have all changed. The way the money works, the top brands now are going to get rewarded. And it's why the SEC and the Big Ten have the contracts they have. And for some of these media, and you mentioned the media that have ripped FSU, Pat Forty in that podcast I was talking about, he's just like, this is ridiculous. It should be based on your revenue should be based on wins and losses, not your brand. It's like, what are you talking about? Why do you think the SEC and the Big Ten get the money they get? It's because of the television ratings. ESPN is a television company. Fox, all they care about is selling ads on their television stations. So,
but see, Pat, this is the problem, Ira, and Corey, you and I have talked about this too. Pat knows that. Ira, Pat knows that. So why would you carry out the facade? What is this intellectual dishonesty over and over and over again? That has to be a personal gripe. Yeah. I mean, listen, we all know what Matt Hayes writes, and everybody understands that situation. It's ridiculous, and he looks like a buffoon.
That column is unbelievable.
It's laughable. It's not even worth our time. But the point is, like, I've met Pat Forty. You know people that know Pat Forty. Pat's not dumb. So this is an intentional three-card Monty. Like, why do you do it? What's the point? That has to be a personal gripe with Florida State. What else can I conclude?
Is it just doubling down on what he wrote 2 years ago?
People don't like to admit they're wrong? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
But, I mean, to think that SMU deserves more money because they had a better season than Florida State. I mean, when they meet, I can promise you, I haven't looked at the ratings. Florida State had better ratings this year than SMU, even though Florida State went 2-10. Why would Fox care about anything else? Why would ESPN care about anything else? Yeah, you want a team that has a number 11 by it or number 9 by it, but good golly, like SMU brings nothing ratings-wise. Maybe they will, but they don't bring anything ratings-wise. And sadly, we could say sadly, that's all that anybody cares about. But it's the truth. Like we live in a big boy world. They care about ratings and they care about revenue and ads. And SMU's not doing anything on that front, even though they had a really good year. So yeah, it all seems disingenuous, but I also think, there's a lot of crow eating. Like people have to eat a lot of crow, right, which is what happened. That we were told it was ironclad. We were told Florida State was idiotic. Look, Florida State basically took all the arrows, broke through the wall. It baffles the mind to think that people thought Florida State should just stand pat because they signed a bad deal 10 years ago. If they would have, they would be at the ACC until 2036 and make, I think I did the math, something like $520 million less than Florida. Now, because they did what they did, they will probably make somewhere in the neighborhood of $120 million less than Florida over the course of that existence, because they're going to make less money the next 5 years, but they just cut into it. But they just made themselves $75 million at least with this new deal to get closer to Florida. And they're not, and they should. They do think about this a little bit. They're not really competing with Wake and Boston College. No. They're competing with Florida and Georgia. And that's the thing that nobody ever kind of understood. Florida State, and so is Clemson. So the fact that they just saved themselves are leveled the playing field by $400 million over the next decade and 2 years with Florida and Alabama and Georgia. How could we say that Florida? I mean, that's exactly what they were trying to do, and that's exactly what Florida State did. Maybe they were a little too upfront about it, or outlandish, or a little too public about it. Somebody had to be, though, because Lord knows Miami didn't lift a finger, and Clemson was doing it in the shadows. Florida State was publicly the face of this thing, and they just made Clemson, I guess Miami and North Carolina, a whole bunch of money, and they got a lot closer to getting out of this league.
They understood something that's just absolutely true. There's no nice way to sue somebody.
Well, right.
There's no nice way to file a lawsuit. And look, man, there was, once you chose this path, you were going to be a bad guy. The ACC was going to hate you, and there are going to be people that would take shots at you. Those that didn't have the foresight to see what is so very obvious, that Florida State is not like some of these other programs in the ACC. And that is not to say anything of the integrity of those universities or the value of their education. We're talking about athletics. And everybody understands that we're talking about the value, the brand, the cachet that Florida State and Clemson, and to a lesser degree, North Carolina, and then obviously Miami, represent in the world of college football. It was always so transparent. I don't understand where the argument came from.
And I get the idea that even if you're removed from the situation, even if you didn't already like Florida State and you saw the comments that they made, you heard that they were suing their conference, you saw, the optics of it. I get it. That's fine. But at the end of the day, Florida State doesn't have to care about the goodness of college football. That's not their job. Their job is not to protect.
He doesn't.
Exactly. I mean, listen. I mean, the SEC went and crippled the Big 12. The Big 10 just destroyed the Pac-12. That's what Florida State's reacting. All of what Florida State has done in the last 2 years is just trying to preserve itself with what the hell everybody else is doing. And so then to criticize them for it is just nuts.
I think I want to make a clarification here because I've ripped Sankey forever because he does not care about this sport at all, and I hate him for it. This is a completely different situation. The SEC was already the best conference in America. That was a greed grab. That was we want everything grab, and everything can crumble around us. This is a survival grab for Florida State. There is a difference. Now, yes, it sucks for the Boston Colleges and the Pitts of the world. Sorry, but Florida State's trying to survive. The SEC was trying to eradicate other conferences only for their personal gain. That's the clarification I wanted to make when it comes to thinking about the good of college football.
And those are great points. And I don't feel that bad for the Boston Colleges in the Wake Forest. So, Wake Forest is at least.
Doug Flutie was 40 years ago, Ira. 40 years ago.
In all these years, you joined the ACC. You were a better football program when you joined the ACC than you've been the last 15 years. I mean, they've gotten all this money from the conference and never done crap with it. So no, I don't feel bad for those schools. They don't care about college football the way Florida State does. So then, and it's one thing to just take your share, but then to try to act like you call the shots because of some grant of rights agreement was ridiculous. So man, I don't feel bad for them at all either.
As we take a break, I just want to intervene here. I'm not going to let you just take shots and act like we don't remember Matt Ryan's era.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, what are we, Corey?
Fair.
Come on, man.
That's my bad.
Football historian out here, not even remembering the greatness of that BC program.
Hall of Famer, Matt Ryan.
Matty Ice.
Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. Seminole Headlines continues. Thanks for being here with us. Pre-recorded today. The boys going to make their way over for the Board of Trustees meeting, and I think that could have ended up bleeding in. We don't know. Plus, I'm on location down here in Clearwater, so we had to
It's a virtual Board of Trustees meeting, though, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is virtual. Hey, let me ask you guys a question.
Okay.
So do you ever, like, when you're being really petty, do you check yourself or do you embrace the pettiness? Because I was thinking, would it be too petty for us to just see if Ben could bring up the Twitter feeds of some of our favorite ACC media people and see what all they've had to say about the settlement? Because
Come on,
I've
Ira.
looked around. I did an informal survey, and I'm not seeing a lot of comments on. There was a lot of comments when Florida State filed the lawsuit. There were a lot of comments then. There were a lot of comments when FSU made their comments last May or 2 Mays ago in Million Island. There's a lot of activity on social media. I'm telling you, I don't know if the Twitter's not working in North Carolina these days. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Is that too petty? Would that be too petty for us to do?
Yeah, life's too short, Ira. Life's too short.
They know. They are wallowing in their shame as we sit here today. They recognize they have been defeated. There are specifically about 5 to 6 that, yes, I would love to target. But, hey, guys, the three of us will be, or at least, well, Corey, will you bless us? Will you be there in Charlotte?
I don't know. I was there last year. Remember, Phillips gave me a sandwich.
Gave you a sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. He must have known something back then.
You think he's still going to be passing out sandwiches?
I think so. I think he's happy, man. He saved the conference. And he kept Florida State Clemson in it for the rest of the decade.
Maybe this year he'll give like a Wake Forest writer a 7/10 of a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly right.
Hold on, let me slice this portion off.
I do think it's interesting to try to look at this and project. In some ways, Jim Phillips does deserve some credit because this conference was never going to be a big time conference in football. It was never going to be the equivalent of a Power 2. Like once this thing started moving this way, time was ticking on the ACC. And so I guess in some ways the agency, like what he had to do was just try to preserve it for as long as he could. And he's done that. I mean, they have made it until the end of 2029.
Yeah.
Now, and that gives them time to figure out, what do we do now? Florida State's going to leave. Clemson's going to leave. North Carolina and Miami are probably going to leave, presuming they get opportunities to go elsewhere to make more money and play big-time college football. They can join forces with the Big 12, and that might very well be an interesting conference that would be a like-minded conference with the teams that remain. I think you have something there, but they got time now to try to figure out, what do we do next?
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, and I think that's where you asked me yesterday on the show, why would the ACC agree with this? And I think, just the more I think about it, it's there was fear. You could lose the lawsuit. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, that was the biggest stick that Florida State could wield is, listen, we're getting this thing through in Florida, and if you want to roll the dice, have at it. You might end up being the Pac-12.
Hey, Ira, real quick on that front, because I want you to comment on this. That was the catalyst, was it not? I mean, that the impetus for all of this has to be what just came down a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was, when the lawsuit was going to move forward in Florida.
I think it was like the train was already going down the mountain, and that just kind of gave it a little bit more gas. And I think that's what's been happening now for the last few weeks. And think about all the things that have come out just really in the last several weeks. I mean, you had the Supreme Court saying we're not interfering. This lawsuit's going through. Depositions are now starting. We're at the point of this case now. These lawsuits were filed a year and a half ago. We're getting to the point now where John Swaffer's going to have to be depositioned.
Dude, athletic directors and presidents don't like being deposed.
I mean, so you've got all that going on. It comes out publicly that North Carolina is laying in the cut, basically talking about how they're getting the hell out too once this is done. So, I mean, I think all of those things combined made it, listen, man, if the worst case scenario is the Pac-12 and just being obliterated, then maybe finding a happy medium, at least for 4 or 5 years. Like you said, if this keeps the league together for 4 or 5 years and then see what happens, it's at that point they may blow up the whole sport and go to a just super conferences thing. So it does. I mean, it's probably the best they could get, but thankfully that they saw that, because for a long time, those other schools have just been telling FSU and Clemson to pound sand, and now they finally at least came to the table.
And I don't think that's a less than small probability that they do blow up the sport and make it 2 power conferences. I don't know if it's 50-50, but it's not 99-1.
No.
There is a chance that happens. And so if that does happen, then this saves the ACC, and they can be – like Florida State could be a member of the ACC and everything but football. Everybody would be doing the Notre Dame, perhaps. And then they join the NFC, whatever the NFC is deemed to be. But they're still a baseball ACC team, and the ACC exists, unlike the Pac-12 now. Maybe the Pac-12 would get back together if something like this happened, because I think from Phillips and the ACC's perspective, kick it down the road 5 years. Keep them here for 5 years. Let's have some big-time power football, make some money, get some ad revenue, and then in 2030, we might not even be talking about this, because Florida State's not jumping ship. They're just joining they're joining a super conference in football, and everything else remains the same. That could be something that happened. Like, we have no idea. This sport has changed so much in the last 3 or 4 years. It's impossible to know how much it's going to change in the next 5 years.
I mean, just even think about over the last 20 years, the reason, there was a point in time in our lifetimes, 25 years ago, people don't believe this, when Florida State joined the ACC made more money than these other conferences. And at that time, the NCAA basketball tournament was the big cash cow. And that's where the ACC was so strong in basketball, and they made their money. Then when football became the big deal in the 2000s, the ACC tried to respond. I'll give Swafford credit. He went after these markets, because the idea then was you wanted the cable systems. Because if you're in Miami or if you're in Boston, if you these cable providers, that's where the money is. But then when the cord cutting all started, now that's out the window. And so
Brands became a big thing.
now it's about brands. It's about who can attract eyeballs. And so now, because nobody knows 5 years from now, nobody knows what the system, ESPN may not be on cable anymore at that point. So everything is constantly changing. So to your point, if you can survive a few more years, if you're the ACC, it's a lot better than the alternative.
But Florida State absolutely knew unequivocally they couldn't stand pat and survive until that day. And that's why they acted on their own behalf and in their best interests. And I just have always failed to see how that eluded people, that they just looked at it as some sort of a selfish move, that they were a bad actor, that they were somebody that was a part of the larger problems that plague college football right now. And I don't know why Florida State seemed, maybe we look at it through a different prism because we cover the team and are very aware of what others say about the program. But I always felt like Florida State in this mess somehow got singled out more than so many others. And I just didn't understand why that would be. Was it jealousy? Was it a hatred because of how good they were in the night? I couldn't figure out why they were the bad actor in all this.
I don't know what it is, man. And I don't want to sit here and like we're wallowing in self-pity.
No,
but it is weird. I mean, if you think about just the big picture of things, the perception going back to tainted title, the Dillards compared to like what was going on at Wisconsin, they never got their grief. I mean, it's just weird how it's always been Florida State. And then, in this situation, I mean, the perception was that Florida State was just, and I get it, man. Some of the comments were a little bit over the top, some of the stuff they put in the lawsuit. But I think to your point, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And
correct.
Florida State's trying to win this lawsuit to get this done, and they ended up getting it done. But it's weird. Even last year when Florida State was bad in football, which sucked, but using that to rub dirt in their face about the year before, getting snubbed. Somehow people were turning FSU complaining about getting snubbed is a knock on FSU. Who wouldn't complain about getting snubbed? It was the biggest crap ever.
That's my point. People are like, cry more.
Yeah.
A-hole.
They went undefeated.
They went undefeated in a Power 4 conference. They beat 2 SEC teams, including LSU. They got me. What are you talking about?
Yep, but Alabama had to get in. Alabama looked good against Georgia, against Carson Beck.
And then to mock them for it, it's just unbelievable.
But hey, we're not. Look, we don't have to relitigate that. Florida State's won. They moved. Whether people criticize Florida State or not doesn't matter, right? Florida State won. They're closer to where they're closer to what they should be. Still not whole, but they're closer to what they should be. Here's the next assignment. You are now getting $15 million a year more than Boston College, on top of gobs of money more you were making over them anyway. Your football revenue.
That we beat them, Corey? You want to make sure they beat them?
Dominate this conference. That's the next assignment. You've got half a decade. Quit pussyfooting around. 2-10 is obviously an anomaly, but you've made one one conference championship game in a decade? Enough of that.
Agreed.
You've got a 5-year run where you've got a runway to get to the playoff every year. Do it. Start dominating this conference because I don't care if you win. Oh, I do care. I don't know why I would say it like that. Whether you win a national championship or not in the next 5 years, remain nationally relevant. Because in 2030, if you've been a playoff team for 3 of the last 5 years,
you're getting called. Yeah,
the offer is going to be pretty substantial. So take care of your own business over the next 5 years.
It's funny.
Everything is set up for Florida State now. They've done the hard work behind the scenes. Everything's set up now for Florida State to position themselves to be, as we said yesterday, I mean, just a hot free agent when things open up here in 3 or 4 or 5 years. But you got to finish the deal. I mean, Corey's right. You can't languish over these next few years.
I was on the phone last night with a Florida State alum. We were having this conversation, comparing notes and kind of celebrating a little bit of the successes of this recent development, but also the conversation concluded with the two of us, like just yelling at each other ridiculously, like, we can't suck anymore. Yeah. I'm tired of all this sucking. We got no excuses. All of the weights have been lifted. Stop sucking. And it's just two Florida State guys going, yeah, Yeah, and another thing, we got to stop sucking.
Yeah. Agreed. Ain't no excuse.
Was that Lakewood star William Floyd?
It might have been, but we were just talking about not sucking anymore. I'm tired of this sucking. Let's go. Yeah, I did. It was like the freedom to say, all right, we have no more distractions. I ain't got time for all this nonsense. We're Florida effing State. Don't be out here making a mockery of the sport. Let's go. And I bet you a lot of Florida State fans kind of felt that way, and we're having a similar conversation. Just like we had all these excuses to fall back on it. They're gone. They're gone.
Well, obviously there's no excuse for 2-10. Well, but there was really from 2017 to now.
Oh yeah.
You've had 2 good years out of 9. That can't happen anymore. Now, if this is the right coach, look, there's a lot of pressure on him now. Apparently, you got an influx of money coming. It's easier to write that check, Ira. It's easier to write that check. But you were already had all the advantages over all these teams. Now you're getting $15 million more at least per year,
minimum.
maybe more than that. Go win the conference. Go at least get to Charlotte.
Yeah, somebody said to me that there's a lot more pressure on Mike Norvell now, and I said, listen, man, if he didn't know there was a lot of pressure on him after last season, he was never going to figure it out. So, man, there's certainly pressure on Mike Norvell. They got to get it done.
He's walking around town. Everybody's just giving him the two fingers back to him. He no longer gets the, hey, coach. It's just a knowing nod. Hey, Mike. Yeah. That's all he's got. This has got to be better. Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. I know we're first guessing here, and it's kind of probably irresponsible, especially given the Seminole Headlines curse, and this would be the ultimate headlines curse if somehow everything got shook up to a
fell apart.
Fell apart here today. But, guys, what do you expect to hear? Don't we think this is just sort of performative? Like this is it, right? We know that they're going to just agree on this and move forward.
Yeah. So from my understanding, they've already agreed. The conference, I think there's I don't know if it's a memorandum of understanding. I don't know what the legal term is, but I do believe that there is something that they've all kind of, Jim Phillips and the 2 schools have agreed to, but they do have to go through the formality of having everybody vote on it. So now, seems like a rubber stamp type thing because I think they already got the votes before they did this. Like Jim Phillips didn't just decide to I think he's already polled all of his members and they know that they've got the votes. But, since it is a formality, I guess there's theoretically a chance something could go off kilter. But, maybe there's a sticky, some board of trustee at Clemson who says, I don't care. We need to go to the end of the earth to get out of this conference right now. Barring something like that, it should be formalized today.
You'd be like, Bob, settle down. We got what we wanted here. Let's do our roll on all this. That's the guy at the wedding. Yeah, I object. I'd like to say something. No, my man, this is already decided.
I must be heard.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't think there was any chance for a hiccup, any chance for something weird to happen.
I mean, just the fact that they have to do it tells you that there is a chance, but it's pretty much a formality. So we're recording this morning. They're supposed to, the ACC's presidents are going to vote on first, then FSU and Clemson will meet around noon. So by the time, if you don't see this until 1 o'clock or after our normal time slot, then, that will have already been done. But when we're recording right now, it has not been officially done yet.
I think we've all done this a time or two, and this is probably petty, but I'll do it often the rest of the week, I'm sure. I would have really enjoyed that conference call, that Zoom call where Jim Phillips is having to talk to all the other programs. Guys, thanks for joining us. Listen, I've got some news. We lost. We lost. Yeah. You're going to take less money, and we're going to give it to Florida State.
Now, who takes the less money? Do we know that? It can't be everyone.
I believe it's very much structured based on
the ratings.
It's going to be like this 5-year window of what your ratings have been over the last 5 years.
A rolling 5-year window.
Yeah. And so if they go back over these last 5 years, wherever you stack in that is what you're going to get. Now, the SMUs and Cals and Stanfords, I think they get to vote, but they don't care. There's no money in it for them either way. They're not getting paid.
They don't get anything
these first few years, no matter what. So, I don't think there's any objections there. And I think a lot of the schools, obviously North Carolina wants it, Miami wants it, Georgia Tech probably even wants it, Louisville probably wants it. The schools that would balk against it are the BCs probably and the Wakes, but
And why is that, Wake?
Yeah.
Why would you balk at such a deal? I'm curious. Go ahead and say it.
Yeah. Since you are the fastest growing brand in college sports.
Yeah. You have nothing to worry about, according to the athletic director at Wake. This is a no-brainer. You're going to be wildly popular if your star continues to rise as you proclaim.
They may not have agreed, but I, at the end of the day, I think then there's some other schools who probably don't love it, but they also don't like the idea of just the conference getting obliterated. So, should we talk about Tavello?
We should talk about Tavello because we're going to see our fine friends at Tavello next week. Florida State will be playing golf at Glenarvan, and I'm going up there. I think you're going up there, Corey. We hope you'll come up there and join us, buddy. I know Tom's going up there as well. Watch
to the golf course. What do I have to wear?
I mean,
you've covered a golf tournament. You're the only one here that's covered a golf tournament.
I covered it at Seminole. Like, what do I have to wear at that place? Do I have to be in a three-piece
suit? You can't wear your Nintendo shirt. I mean, you are going to have to.
Why? Why? I'm a human being. You got to tell me how I get to dress? Maybe I won't be there, guys. We'll see.
Well, you could just meet us at Tavello.
Yeah, I might do that. I definitely would do that before
you don't even have to wear a shirt at Tavello, so you could just.
Oh, now you're talking. Now you're speaking my language.
I knew if I offered that up.
Okay.
So we can go to Tavello afterwards. Really, the golf is just an excuse to go to Tavello.
Okay,
let's be honest about this. We're going to go see some great golf, and we will, and that's a wonderful course.
Is Clanton playing?
I believe so.
Okay. I'll go watch Luke Clanton. How about that guy, by the way? I know we're talking about Tavello, but holy cow.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
We can watch him at Tavello.
There's actually a bunch of opportunities this week, this weekend to get your Tavello beer. Again, Tavello Brewing in Thomasville, Georgia. So starting this weekend, real quick, I'll go through them all. Friday night is First Friday, the first Friday of the month in Thomasville. You guys, listen, if you haven't been up there before, if you haven't been up there for a First Friday, you should check it out. Basically, they allow people to walk around. You can be drinking and walking around, sipping and strolling, having a good time. They give armbands at all the different restaurants and bars that participate in it. And you go around, check out all the different bars and restaurants. They do events for it on Friday night. They also have a band in the amphitheater there. It's just a cool time if you go up there Friday night. So Tavello obviously will be open for that. Then on Saturday and Sunday, over the weekend, they're going to be at a couple of events in Valdosta. On Saturday, the Georgia Beer Company is having an event for the Forgotten Coast Canine. It's to benefit the canine group there in Valdosta. And it's a chili cook-off and beer fest. Tavello is going to be there in Valdosta on Saturday. And then also this weekend, there's an event at Pebble Hill Plantation, the Polo Grounds, where they actually have polo. Listen, I don't know if I'm going to a polo event, but Tavello is going to be there too. And then, like you said, on Monday, FSU's golf tournament is in Glenarvan in Thomasville on Monday and Tuesday. And so after the golf events on Monday and Tuesday, well, definitely on Monday, we're going to be there. Tavello's going to be open. We're going to have a good time there. And so people can swing by. Check us out on Twitter. We'll probably give you more ideas about times and things like that. But big weekend for Tavello.
I want to point out, too, guys, if you're thinking about going to that First Friday, Ira gets loose.
Oh, man. It's a good time.
It's like you get there like an hour after that thing gets going. He's had a few pops. You may find him, willing to talk about anything for hours on end. Find Ira. He is getting loose. I'll
tell you what I really think about the ACC.
Yeah, now we'll get down and dirty. We'll get into it. Good times. Good times. Well, I do know this. I haven't checked. You guys can tell me. But I'm going to guess that this is a 70-30 split as we round out the hour before we get to headliner questions. Like 80-20, 70-30 on the boards, guys. I'm going to assume that people were pretty happy. Like as the hours went by yesterday, they started divulging this and learning about this. Digesting this is the word I was looking for. Like did they figure it out that this was a win?
I think to Corey's point, there's probably some raw emotions at first. And we got texts from friends, I'm sure, that felt the same way. Because,
I wrote back, you're a moron.
Yeah,
is that what you
that's
did?
what Ira did. That's what Ira wrote back too. When I was complaining to Ira, he told me I was a moron.
I texted right back, take some time to calm down. You're a moron.
Yeah.
I think, listen, there's still some people. I mean, I wrote my column yesterday about it. And, some of the comments on the tribal council were, you're on drugs, you're just trying to spin this. And it's like, listen, I can't go back and forth with you on this. We've laid out the facts. This is what it is. I'm not trying to, be condescending, even though I'm sure I sound it. it is what it is. I can't convince you of what you don't want to believe, but it's a good deal for Florida State. And I think more people do. I think most people, I would say the majority, I don't know if it's 70-30 or if it's 80-20 or 65-35. I think most people now think it's a good deal for Florida State. Corey, you agree or no?
Yeah, but I think it's a good deal or the best deal they could get. Like, again, the good deal is you're in the Big Ten next year. Now, we all know that's not realistic as the way the timetable's going.
That would have been great.
It would have been awesome. So when you go into a lawsuit thinking you're going to get out of the ACC and you'll land in the Big Ten in 2026, Ohio State's playing in Doak, to you're going to watch Syracuse and Doak for the next couple of years, for the next half decade. Yeah, I think there's some pushback that it was a great win for Florida State, but it was a win because I do believe that it was a win. It wasn't the ultimate win. You got to wait 5 years. Look, man, you've got to wait. You've got to wait 5 years. Be a grown up and wait 5 years. And when you wait 5 years, the world will open up to you. But instead of waiting till 2036, you get to wait till 2030, and you get to make a lot more money in the process.
And pay a lot less.
One last thing real quick, Jeff, sorry. But for the people that didn't watch Wake Up Warchant or the Jeff Cameron Show or the Monday Smash, and they were waiting for us to talk about it, just to clarify, so the number out there yesterday was $200 million if they walk today, going down to $100 million in 2930, and it's a gradual decline. I think it's going to come out today. Stay connected to warchant.com. It's going to come out today that the numbers are actually even better than that. Those numbers, which I think a lot of people are excited about, are actually higher than what it's really going to be. And I think people will feel better about the idea. Maybe it won't even be 4 or 5 years. Maybe it could be a little bit sooner.
Let's carry it over to hour 2, boys. We got to get moving. Headliner questions next. Hour number 2, Seminole headlines. Headliner questions underway. And I imagine there should be good. Should be some good questions in there. A lot of people with thoughts and opinions on the news from yesterday. Before we get to it, we say thanks to our friends at Birch Orthodontics. Dr. Birch, I'm forever thankful. The teeth are free in the Cameron household. Everybody straight teeth, doing well, feeling good. They go back. Clark goes back in a week. That's the retainer era, Ira. You know this. Yeah. The retainer era is upon us. But nonetheless, great work. And they took a proud picture a week ago, and I posted that as well. Dr. Birch standing proudly, as she should have been, next to a very tough case in Clark Cameron, and it got worked out. And if you, yourself personally, or your family members, whomever it might be, need the best in orthodontic work, Birch Orthodontics all the way.
All ages welcome. I've got a couple of retainer stories for you, Jeff, and you're not totally out of the woods yet.
Well, I did tell you that when they break them.
And my one daughter, who's now studying for her PhD,
through her way,
who we all, is a bright kid. I think I'll remind you of the time she tried to really clean her retainer by boiling it, which is not advisable. When you get to the retainer stage, do not put your retainer in boiling water.
That's smart. Heather should tell people that every time she hands one.
By the way, don't try to clean this in a fire or boiling water.
Yeah.
Don't lance your.
But anyway, we're all happy for Clark. And listen, look, Dr. Birch, don't drop us now just because all our kids have come through. Corey and Stephanie's
kids having another kid, guys. So hang in there. Like 15 years from now, we may have another client.
Maybe we can adopt some kids, like go Big Brothers or something, and
sure.
Take them down to Dr. Birch, get their teeth straightened out. But you guys can definitely go to birchorthodontics.com, BURCH orthodontics.com. They make it so convenient and easy with payment plans and free consultations, and they handle tough cases, all the latest technology, and just great people. And bring your family into their family. They're great people.
I agree.
Great. Well said, Ira.
Butch writes, hello, boys. Over the last 12 or so hours, all I've heard is how much of a win this is for Florida State. The only win I see or read is the reduction in the exit fee, which I do think is great. But we continue to be a member of a conference that is visibly losing its value and credibility. Football continues to suffer. Basketball, baseball, softball, and other sports have lost significant ground to the other conferences.
Well, not baseball. That's incorrect.
Or softball or soccer. With the lack of revenue this conference generates, this steady decline will continue to the point that this conference will be extinct and everyone will scramble to get out. Take care. Well, yes. Yes, and now Florida State will make a lot more money before they leave as they, get everything that they asked for. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but the other alternatives, your two other alternatives were to just sue to the death, which might have taken 2 or 3 more years. Meanwhile, you're making less money, and you might lose the lawsuit. Or somehow you force them, you force Jim Phillips to say, okay, you can leave, but then you get a partial share in one of these other conferences, and you're not making what you were going to make anywhere because they're in the middle of their TV rights. I get it. I understand. Like, this isn't the dream scenario, but what other scenario was out there that was better? I can't think of anything.
Well, the other scenario that people were hoping is that you could just leave and get into the Big Ten. The reality of that is, like Ira said, and it's the biggest point other than the exit fee actually being an exit fee. There's actually a number now, and you're going to know what it is, and it's going to be doable. But the Big Ten probably wasn't going to make you a full share member in 2026. It just wasn't going to happen. Their deal runs till 2030, and it's a good one. Purdue's not going to take less money so Florida State can join as a full member. So that's what you're dealing with. You're talking about making the same money so basically you'd be making, if you'd have gone to the Big Ten as a partial member or with a partial share, you would be making what you're making in the ACC now, but playing in a tougher conference. Right. You know what I'm saying? And you also just had to pay $300 million, $500 million, whatever it is to get out of this conference. Like what they did again, like I think a good compromise or a good negotiation is when nobody's happy at the end of it. A good settlement, I guess. Nobody's exceedingly happy. But I can tell you Florida State's happier now than they were 6 months ago. I would think. No. I just because you have an exit fee. Yeah, you have an exit ramp. You have an off ramp. I think it's not tomorrow.
If the people who are convinced that they could get off scot-free and not have to pay $500 million and get a full share in one of those other conferences, yeah, you're disappointed. I get it. But
that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, it could have. We thought maybe there was a chance, but clearly I don't think they were offered that. And Michael Alford's like, no. Let's ride this out till 2030. We owe it to the ACC. No, man, this is the best deal by far they clearly thought they could get.
Well, I think both sides really feared losing the lawsuit. I mean, there's no this idea that at some point we all knew that this was never going to go the distance. We said there would be a compromise because neither could afford to lose. You could not afford to lose this lawsuit. Now, the fallout from losing the lawsuit would have been far more damaging for the ACC if they lost the lawsuit. And everybody just leaves and goes wherever they want and they don't lose any money and all that other stuff. It would have been financially crippling and devastating for Florida State to lose the lawsuit. But the ACC recognizing we could lose is what led to this compromise, and a compromise that they repeatedly said to Florida State they would never make, and whose members constantly said, go to hell when presented. So, no, Florida State won. It's not close. Florida State won. This is a bad day for the ACC. They lost. They lost.
I agree.
Now, look, again, yes, some utopian idea that they could have got all the money, never had to pay a penny, and they were going to sign up and go to the Big Ten, get a full share tomorrow. Well, all right. Juxtapose that. Yeah, I suppose you're disappointed. If the exit fee, writes Tony, is truly around $200 million, could FSU realistically raise that amount if they put all their resources into fundraising to leave the ACC as soon as possible? If they could, would you want them to do that, or would you want them to wait a few years for it to drop? Also, he adds, Corey, you were out last time I asked this question. How wide did you choose Georgia over Florida State?
Georgia had a journalism program and Florida State does not.
That is 100% correct. Yes.
Plus, it was an in-state school, so I got the Hope Scholarship that I wouldn't have gotten in Florida.
So back to the other part of this. Look, I don't think we necessarily want to get out early to not have a home.
No, with a full share, for sure.
With a full share.
Just do the math. Like if you're having to pay $200 million, if you pay $200 million right now and you go to the Big Ten and instead of getting $80 million a year for 5 years, you get $40 million. Well, what have you gained? Like, I guess you're in the Big Ten. That's what you've gained, but you're losing money in the meantime.
But if the ACC right now, if these schools are already getting close to $40 million, say, and it fluctuates a little bit, say it's $45 million a year in the ACC, and you add 15 to 20 million on top of that, well, now you're getting to 60. And so, I mean, that's a lot better than getting half of what those other conferences might be able to give you. So mathematically, It makes more sense. Now you could get to a point, because it's a sliding scale, that a year from now or 2 years from now, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's not the full 5 years, but it's definitely, I even if you can raise the money right now, I don't know that that's the right decision, because you're going to make less in those other leagues.
Adam writes, hey, gentlemen, love the show. I know football is the big news, but I'm looking forward to getting back to the TLC for Coach Ham this weekend. Have any of you heard what is going to happen with Stan Jones? Is he going to take the Mickey route and stay on to stabilize the transfer of the coaching staff?
I've had a few people ask that. It's not obviously not decided. Stan Jones, Leonard Hamilton's assistant coach, going back to his days at Miami, I don't know, 30 years ago.
30 years, yeah.
And so has been with him forever, and has been here the whole time Ham's been here. If Luke Laux gets the job, I could see a scenario maybe where, Stan stays around in some capacity, because he coached him. And Stan and his family live in Tallahassee. They're really good people. They love it here. They're Noles. But I don't know. I don't know if you hire somebody else from outside. I don't know how it works for him. So,
and also, I would say typically Leonard Hamilton is leaving because the team isn't any good.
Right.
You don't usually keep holdovers from a bad basketball team. You know what I mean? It's not like Leonard's retiring on top. He's retiring as after another middling season. Usually assistants. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. Usually assistants from middling teams don't stay on.
Yeah, I'm just saying I think the one scenario might be Luke Laux, because he played for him. I can see that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I wouldn't expect it.
Brad's mad at me, so he won't be after this week. Here you go. He writes, no, Jeff, you didn't ask all the Facebook questions last week. You falsely claimed to.
Ooh.
Yep. Well,
False
Jeff
claim.
does lie.
All about especially when it comes to Facebook.
Yes.
Maybe third week is the charm for this one.
All right.
Brad, this is your big moment.
Better be a good one with that setup, Brad.
Brad, here we go. What happens if the SEC and the Big Ten now do something similar to reward the brands like Ohio State and Alabama, and to lessen the revenue of coattail riding grifters like Maryland and Rutgers and Vandy? If they move quickly to do so, the programs we are trying to financially catch and compete with could distance themselves again.
Yeah. Is that the question?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
Well, we brought it up in the first hour too.
Yeah, I don't know how he asked that question 3 weeks ago, though. But
he did.
Maybe it's a different question.
But yeah, it's a different question that I ignored. The other two, I suppose, were different. But I didn't ignore this one, Brad. I would also say we're part of those that would be amongst the haves upon entering the program.
No, but I think he's saying if it happened here in the next year in Florida State's, then Ohio State's, instead of making $80 million, they're making $100 million. So what you've gained, you've lost. Again, yes, that could happen. Wouldn't be great in the short term. But if and when you join one of these super leagues, you would be one of the ones with big ratings that would get the bigger piece of the pie. And also, again, I want to stress this. Don't worry about Ohio State and Alabama right now. Worry about flipping Pitt and Boston College and Duke. That's who you have to beat right now. Get your butt in the playoff, man. Get your butt to Charlotte, and then worry about when you're in the quarterfinals. Golly, Ohio State's just too good. Go see if they're too good by getting there. There's no excuse. Again, you get 5 years of this will be the easiest time for the rest of recorded history for Florida State football to have an avenue to the playoff. These next 5 years are the easiest chance they're going to have to get in. It's not close. So go take advantage. It's like winning the NFC South. That's all you got to do when you get into the playoff. That's all Tampa Bay has to do is win the NFC South. Well, he's taking a shot at my own team.
Yeah, I was going to say, he can't take a shot. We win it every year.
No, but I'm saying I'm taking a shot at my own team. Like the NFC South sucks. There's no excuse if you feel like you're a real football team to not go win it.
He ignores in all of this all the time, Ira, that a Super Bowl was won by the NFC South. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, winners of
that was a COVID year. That doesn't count. It's like the Dodgers World Series.
Moreover, they have also been to the second and third rounds of the playoffs as well. Yeah, man. The Bucks have had some success in the postseason. Prior to this season, the Bucks had won more playoff games in the last 5 years than any other.
Look, man, what are we doing? What are we doing? This ain't Buccaneers headlines. I'm not. I was criticizing my own team.
You belittle the NFC South champion Buccaneers on a regular basis.
I was belittling the conference, but that proves my point.
Back to the question. I just want to say, yeah, that's a valid point. It could happen, but you can't. Florida State couldn't not do what they did because that may happen. Like it's
right.
They did what they could do, and they got the best they could.
I would love for Sankey to propose that to the Mississippi schools, like because they love him right now. He's eradicated the earth for their purposes, and they have done nothing in this sport forever. And then he calls up Ole Miss and is like, "Yeah, look, you're gonna. Sorry to tell you this, but Alabama's going to make $12 million a year more than you, or $21 million a year. You're actually taking a pay cut. Sorry, man. All of a sudden, he's not as beloved." The stuff he's done to the rest of the country,
this is why
now he starts doing it to a league. I wouldn't think it'd go over well.
Yeah. But that call should go to South Carolina before anybody. They've done nothing in the history of their program. I missed a question. Here we go. Another good one here. Marlon writes, where are you, Marlon? Good day, gents. And hearing all the good news of the settlement along with the construction being on schedule stirs up just how disappointed I am, though, in Mike for dropping the ball and allowing Clemson to take back the conference. 9-3 is what won this conference last year. And for the last couple of years, while we are here, should be the standard minimum that we go 9-3 with Mike. Will Mike make it to our new conference? Love the show as always, Marlon. Thanks, Marlon.
Good question.
No, I mean, that is the question. We don't know. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, it's a show and prove time for Mike, man. Good graces are over.
Well, what this does is the dust settles on all this. And I think Corey will be writing about this for Warchant.com. Now it cleared the smoke will settle, and then the focus will be 100% on football winning. And yeah, man, it's got to happen. There's no other option. Football can't fail. They have to be good, and it's his job to make it happen.
Yeah, you don't have to be like great. You be good. You'll get to Charlotte.
As he pointed out, 9-3.
Yeah, 9-3 gets you in the playoff every year in this conference, almost certainly.
Ryan writes, gentlemen, are you sad now that Swaffy won't get deposed? I can't see how anyone can spin this other than a win for FSU. Less than $100 million for leaving in the summer of 2029.
Yeah. When again, last year at this time, we were told there wasn't even a number. They could leave, but the ACC would still own their grant of rights till 2036. Now we're told they can leave
Corey
with their grant of rights in 5 years for less than 100. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And I would just say, recommend people, if you're trying to decide who won and who lost, just go on social media and look at some of our friends in the ACC and what they've been saying, which is nothing. Think of the crowing they would be doing if Florida State did really come with their hat in their hand. That's not what happened.
You can also just make it up and write whatever you want, Matt Hayes.
True. Matt Hayes, yeah, you're right.
You just write anything you want. Just live in this dream world. Just make stuff up. It's great. Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. More questions, headliner questions, in fact. By the way, we never answered whether or not we are disappointed that we didn't get to see the deposition for Swafford.
Yeah, I think that would have been, I'm guessing maybe there would have been some, I don't recalls.
That's the play. That's the play. I don't recall.
Maybe I'm misremembering.
Yeah.
Well, that's Roger Clemens. Yeah. Kevin writes, all right, fellas, yesterday's breaking news has me excited about the future of FSU football for the first time since walking out of Aviva Stadium last August. With all eyes on 2030.
Wait, he was excited?
Excited walking out?
Walking in, I think, is probably what he meant to say, walking into Aviva Stadium.
He wrote walking out.
I know. I'm sure you read it right. I think you wrote that wrong. Nobody was excited walking out of that stadium.
Maybe he saw a measure of hope.
Yeah, he saw that offensive line just really take charge there in the second half.
Something there, guys. I think we're going to be all right.
That Georgia Tech team's tough.
Yeah. With all eyes on 2030, how many wins over the next 4 years do we need to get in order to get an invite to the Power 2, 7+ annually, 8+, 9+? Or do you even believe with continued inconsistent success, we are still getting the invite to finally leave this wine and cheese eating dumpster fire of a conference? Follow-up question, do you believe that Norvell will be here to lead the that seems to be a repeating question. It's happening, Mike. just so you know, it's already happening. The narrowing of the lens is going straight towards Mike Norvell as we speak. But I think, to Corey's point, he was well aware, Ira's point as well, that he was well aware that he was under a microscope. You can't go 2-10 and not be. So I think Florida State would get the invite either way, but let's not risk it.
Yeah, I think that, it's probably get it either way. Certainly if you're average to good, you're going to get it. It just doesn't help your cause, obviously, if you're bad. So, yeah, I mean, but I don't think you have to be like a wonder, just a phenom over these next 5 years. You just have to be solid, but it would be good. The better you get, obviously, the more marketable you are. And what the key, really the interest here isn't just to get an offer from the Big Ten, but it's, getting the SEC to where because the SEC is later. So the SEC would have to move up their schedule to change their plans to try to invite Florida State, maybe Clemson, North Carolina ahead of the Big Ten. So, yeah, the better you are, the better chances you have of that.
Yeah, and I also think I would say this though. I think they're appealing either way. Because I don't expect more 2-10s. If they're 2-10 for the next half decade, who wants to do this job anyway? Who wants to watch them play anymore? Right. You don't want them to go to the Big Ten if they can't hack it in the ACC. It would be a bludgeoning. But look, man, UCLA's accomplished almost nothing in the history of their program. They got an invite. USC hadn't been really good in a decade and a half. They got an invite. I know they have those markets, but the point being, the reason those markets were the reason they wanted USC and UCLA is because the viewership they could get. Florida State would still theoretically be bringing viewers, which is the most important thing, even more than wins, because USC and UCLA weren't, winning a bunch of championships, and they got to go to the Big Ten.
Yeah. Sean, who is, OG headliner, right? So as it stands, FSU baseball sits at 11 straight wins. If they match the record of 23 set by our 2007 Noles, will Corey give us an hour number 2?
No, man. Look, man, I don't know that there has not been a better regular season baseball team in the last 50 years than Florida State. We don't do hour number 2s for the regular season baseball success because it's expected and it's historical and it's always happened. The hour number 2 comes if and only if they're hoisting something in Omaha. And I don't mean a beer or a shot. I mean the world championship belt.
The world championship.
World championship belt in Omaha. That's an hour number 2. Not for 23 wins. I expect that.
We don't know if that's somewhere in Spain. There's an elite collegiate team that Florida State would have easily vanquished. So
yeah, that's true. You can't claim. I'm still saying they're the world champs. There's probably some good teams in Japan, but they don't really do college baseball over there, so I don't know.
Steve wants to know if the amount to leave the ACC actually becomes $200 million effective today. Well, why would we wait to 2030 to leave? Even with the added funds, it's still putting us behind the Power 2, not to mention all the other disadvantages that come with staying in this league. Well, Ira, Corey, we kind of touched on this before. I mean,
we were asked the exact same question and answered it already.
Well,
sometimes, Ira, I would like a host, like a moderator, to be a little more discerning and not ask the same question.
But here's Corey. Corey, here's what happens. That question was worded differently prior.
Okay.
Secondly, I would say that if I do that, I get evil Facebook posts from Brad.
That's fair.
And
that's fair. You ignored his question. I got you.
I'm just not going to risk it.
We touched on earlier, but yeah, the idea is that it's not very likely. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody knows for sure because the Big Ten can't offer FSU right now, or couldn't until maybe when this deal is done. But the idea is that nobody really expects Florida State to be able to get a full share in the Big Ten right now because they're in the middle of their deal, which was already negotiated. So those schools would have to give less. Those schools would have to give some of their piece of the pie to Florida State if they offered them tomorrow. So that's the concern. But it's I get the concern. I get the idea. Nobody's saying that this is the perfect scenario, but with the alternatives that they have, it definitely seems like the best.
I think there's one thing we haven't talked about. So I'm glad we asked this question, Jeff. Mm-hmm. One thing we haven't talked about is it's not like the negotiation has to wait until 2029 to figure out where you're going. That will happen I would guess 2027, 2028, you'll know, like Texas and Oklahoma still had to play at least 1 year in the Big 12 after they had agreed to go to SEC, maybe 2. I think they had 2 years left, and they played 1 and then paid the exit fee. So I assume that you might know where Florida State is going in after the 2020 or during 2028 season. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're going to have to wait 5 years to know where the landing spot is. That negotiations and offers can start really anytime.
I believe that is correct. And I brought that question up after this show ends in the power hour, the bonus hour, whatever we want to call it. I have Andy Staples on, and I said, don't you think that we'll start to see and hear and leaked information about negotiations a lot sooner than 2029? And he said, yeah, that he wrote about it as well, that he thinks that maybe 2027, 2028, you'll start hearing about where it is.
Florida State. 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. That's really soon. And my guess is it might be even sooner. I mean, I think, because there's nothing, like you said, and in that right, Corey, Ira, don't you think that there's nothing keeping Florida State from pitting the SEC and the Big Ten against one another if that's going to start? Because the SEC comes to market later than the Big Ten, so the SEC might preemptively say, we need to get out in front of this, man, because we don't want the Big Ten to plant a flag with Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, and Miami here in our backyard. Like, let's do something and get out in front of this.
Yeah, and I also don't think that's why, I would push back a little bit. That's definitely locked in for 5 years because this number is going to be going down. And as I said, it's going to be less than 200 million. Like, it's from the beginning, it's going to be, I think, substantially less than 200 million. And by the end, I think it's going to be substantially less than 100 million. Those numbers are going to come out later today. Hey, let me ask a question from email.
Mm-hmm.
Make an exception. Our guy, Sean Allen, a friend of the program, emailed us yesterday. Since
does he not have Facebook or Twitter?
Not Facebook or Twitter.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're not doing this for everybody. I've known Sean for a long time.
Smart. I'm glad he does it. That's smart.
But he said, "Hey guys, since we're not talking Taylor Swift anymore instead of FSU hoops, how about Sabrina Carpenter?" That was his. Listen.
Honestly, I don't know who that is.
You don't. So, yeah, you guys don't have.
I know who she is, but only because, I knew it anyway. I'd seen her on a podcast, and she's apparently a huge star. Like, she sells out stadiums. But she was on the SNL music, or she was on the SNL 50.
Oh, which one? Which one? Well, who was she?
She was the one that did a duet with Paul Simon on the 50s.
Okay, yeah.
And she's the one that said, not only was I not born when this song was released, my parents weren't born either. And they sang, I don't remember what it was, I Am a Rock or something. But
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if Ben wants to just, whenever we talk about FSU basketball, put up Sabrina Carpenter.
I don't know, because I think she's like 22-ish.
Well, I think mid-20s maybe. Yeah, it's a little creepy.
I went on a huge rant about how Bill Belichick should be in prison.
We heard it.
So we can't start putting the 22-year-old. We can't start. Taylor Swift's more age appropriate.
Our man Noel Tiggety on Twitter. Just a quick question. I only need a number. What year can we burn Snuggy Hill to the ground?
They got to play there at least one more time, I'm thinking.
Right.
So whenever that happens, torch it.
Somebody just posted, awesome. Bruce says, here's my question. If we left this year, it was 500 million plus, but 5 years from now, that total is reduced. How much are we really saving? I get that we finally have a number, and there is savings between paying for the exit and media rights.
Yeah, I mean, the point of it was the $600 million was just a number that the FSU attorneys put out there is a hypothetical.
Right.
With the formula being the exit fee was $130 or $140 million. That's the exit fee. And then the media rights for Florida State through 2036, they were multiplying how many years that was left by 35 million or whatever it was the ACC is getting each year from their TV deal. And that's how they came up with that number. But the reality is the ACC could have said, no, we're not selling you your media rights. Go play wherever you want to play. We're getting that money from from our TV partners. So I don't,
that's what the ACC did say in their lawsuit. Yeah. When they filed lawsuit, they did the preemptive lawsuit first, and they said there wasn't a number because you don't own your grant of rights till 2036. Now you do.
So now they have the number, and again, it's lower than people think, and it's going to go lower every year,
significantly lower. Special birthday edition of mine, writes Corey, of Seminole Headlines. So happy birthday, Corey. 6-man tag tournament. Could FSU's 3 most recent head coaches beat any set of coaches from another ACC/UF team? So like Jimbo, Odell, and Willie.
Oh, so Norvell doesn't count.
Jimbo, Odell, and Willie's pretty formidable trio.
Yeah.
Well, because of Odell.
Yeah, but and Willie, I think Willie's a street kid from Bradenton.
And Jimbo works out.
Yeah.
So we know that. So he's in decent shape and he's mean.
Plus
so that helps.
Yeah, he's just crazy.
I think he's probably a little crazy.
They would definitely take North Carolina.
Jimbo is 100% sneaking a foreign object into the ring,
and I like that about him.
Yeah,
I like that about him. I know that he's not fighting fair.
He's distracting the referee while Odell pulls out the brass knuckles.
Jimbo's got a little Cowboy Bob Orton in him from back in the day. Little cowboy. There's a foreign object for you. Little Cowboy Bob Orton.
I always thought he's more of a hacksaw Jim Duggan.
No, Duggan had he had the big stick. He was there.
Didn't he have a big 2x4 that he
was hiding nothing.
You're right. Wait, hide. He was up front.
I sat next to him on a plane flight to Orlando one time and talked with him for an hour and a half about wrestling. It was awesome.
Jim Duggan?
Yeah, hacksaw.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he never had a hacksaw with him, which is odd.
So,
Florida's – I feel like we should do –
I mean, any group with McElwain loses.
Yeah.
So their Florida's out.
You just show him a picture of a shark, and he's like, oh, God. And he's done. He sets up. So I would say – in Napier, you're not scared of Napier. I worry about Odell's knees.
Yeah, but he gets you on the ground. He's the dude. He gets them on the ground, and then it's just ground and pound.
Jason writes, last month ESPN announced they were picking up the ACC option until 2036. Now we hear the exit fees drop considerably around 2030. If FSU and Clemson leave, does the ACC contract continue without them?
Yeah. Well, look, man, but also none of this happened without ESPN signing off, right? Right? There's no way you think Phillips was like, this is what I think we're going to do. Sorry, ESPN.
Well, okay, so I think when the ESPN realized that that the ACC could lose, I could see them coming in saying, look, man, you're going to have to sweeten the pot. We can't have these boys leaving.
Well, yeah, and I mean, listen,
if they're not going to be here.
Yeah, ESPN certainly was not against this being resolved. For a lot of reasons. One, it keeps FSU in this conference for a period of time. Also, it preserves the grant of rights. Now the challenge to the grant of rights is over, and that was concerning to them based on everybody else. Plus, their people would have been deposed.
But don't you think it has been considerably weakened to the point where there'll be no more of this ironclad nonsense? The world saw that they faced with the idea that they could lose, and they thought they might, or they wouldn't have acquiesced. I mean, how strong is that grant of rights really? But anyhow.
And as far as what happens to the conference, man, when Florida State and Clemson lose, my understanding is the ESPN contract, they will get paid a lot less. Like that's part of this, the FSU, when the ACC and ESPN had to opt in just like a month ago for 2030 to keep the contract going through 2037 through 2036. I believe there's language in there that protects ESPN if this happens, if Florida State, because they know it's a possibility. And so now they're more protected than they were before. And ESPN will keep the ACC to some degree, but they're going to get paid a lot less. And they're going to, they'll be playing games on Thursday and Friday nights or Monday nights like the MAC. It's just going to be a totally different, but ESPN still wants the inventory. So they're not just going to throw it away.
Really quick, rapid fire. I want to get 2 or 3 in before we take another break here. Patrick, does the new model of revenue sharing in the ACC incentivize scheduling more difficult games? Well, they're going to have to do it anyhow for those ratings that they want. And they were already going to play more games against Notre Dame, and we know they've got Alabama and Georgia on the horizon. But Ira, to the big question there.
Yeah, no, I think Notre Dame's the big key to that. That was also part of that new TV contract is Florida State and Miami are going to be, and Clemson are going to be playing Notre Dame much more often. And so now for Florida State in particular, you already play Florida and Miami and you play Florida out of conference. You've been playing these Georgia and Alabamas. You also have Miami and Clemson, and now you're adding Notre Dame. So yeah, the strength specifically about Florida State, the strength of the schedule is not going to be a concern, I don't think, for a while.
Well, it'll be concerned as far as wins and losses, but It's
well,
almost
but in
like
terms of getting
you're playing two different games.
Yeah.
Right.
You're playing the wins and losses game, but you also, I mean, it's a lot of eyeballs. Florida State and Athens will have a lot of eyeballs on it.
Kevin writes, do you think if the ACC and its premier programs were marketed correctly all along, they could have actually been a bigger and better, more of a top league? FSU, Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina, Duke's a national brand, Stanford, Pitt, all have had success at points in time. Do you think this was a marketing issue, guys?
No. I think it's a fan base issue. I think it's a care issue. I think there's probably 3 teams in this conference that truly care about football and have the fan base to show for it. And Miami's not one of them. Miami's fan base shows up when they're good, and that hasn't been for a while now. So, no, I think there's nothing you could do with Duke. Yeah, they've had some nice seasons. They don't care. I think, were they not undefeated when Florida State played them this year up there, or that Friday night game, or close to it?
Yeah, they were.
There's 28,000 people there, man. They don't care about football, and they never will, which is the whole problem with the conference.
That's the worst thing about Snuggy Hill. The worst thing about Snuggy Hill is you're losing to this team that their fans are in the stands.
Don't care about.
They're not even paying attention.
Yeah.
So, but no, real quick. Yeah, I agree 100% with what Corey said. The problem is the alumni bases. There's graphics out there. You can go look. The alumni base size of the Big Ten schools, the SEC schools, and the ACC schools, and it's plain as day. The ACC, so even if they don't have the alumni base, so they don't have the fan support, and they weren't good when the sport got popular, so they can have a great season, but people aren't going to watch it.
Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. Last of the batch here, boys. Let's get to these questions. Rapid fire. Scott says, with FSU leaving for one of the Power 2 conferences eventually, will you look at the machinations of the SEC and Big Ten to consolidate power differently? Ira.
I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Like, are they going to? I don't know either. Really,
try again next week with a little bit more detail. We're not
the machinations to consolidate power.
Well, he's going to watch. He wants to know if we're going to be looking in a little bit closer on the SEC and the Big Ten to see what they do, like what more unified power structure front.
Oh, maybe, I don't know. But that might be what he's talking about. Is like the more money for the better schools type thing.
Mm-hmm. And maybe also just, we see it differently also because, we've been very critical of Greg Sankey for what he's tried to do to the ACC. If FSU gets into those, would our viewpoint change?
No, you'll be happy to be playing big boy football and making a gazillion dollars to do it, but I still hate what's happened to the sport.
Yeah, we can all hate that, but also want what's best for Florida State.
Correct. Croft writes, weekly greetings, Jen. Since December 23, it's not been super fun to be a Noles football fan. There have been issues. With the news of the ACC settlement, do you also feel like a huge cloud now has been lifted? Is this the best month for football fans after being kicked for 14 months?
That's what Ira wrote on warchant.com. That was kind of the column that there was finally some good news. I do think that's because there's a target. There's a runway. There's an exit ramp. You see the end. You see the horizon. You know that it's coming. You know you can get there now. It's not going to be in a courtroom or lawsuits or depositions for the next 5 years. You get to know that in 5 years, at minimum in 5 years, you're going to be able to go somewhere else. And hopefully with like 3 playoff appearances under your belt in the meantime, because you're making more money than everybody in the conference.
At maximum 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
R.A. writes, gentlemen, my daughter has turned my new son-in-law into a loyal listener up in Maryland.
Nice.
You guys trade joining the Big Ten next year for 10 years of results similar to the Terps since 2014. Hashtag ironclad sharpens ironclad.
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, that's something that people have thrown out through the years, throughout the saga is, what's it done for Maryland? What's it done for Rutgers? Yeah, I get it. But what were they doing before? It's not like Maryland. It's not like Maryland is running the table in the ACC either. They are what they are. I think they're much happier to have the money that they've got now than they would have been if they were still in the ACC sucking there. So yeah, they've had a couple windows where they were pretty good, but Maryland's been Maryland. So I think Florida State. If Florida State went to the Big Ten and was Maryland for 10 years, that would not be great. But I don't expect that either.
Yeah.
Well, no, because they're Florida State.
Anyone else?
Right. Which has had 5 winning seasons in the last 10 years. That hurts. JB writes, I had the pleasure of speaking to Ira at the softball game Saturday. We discussed the end of Coach Ham's tenure amongst many other topics and reminisced about what it looked like when he took over. Hopefully fans will appreciate what he did for FSU basketball.
That was a great conversation. JB's a really nice guy, big softball fan out there watching the Noles. Yeah, it was nice to hear what he said. And, what he was saying was he really hopes that in these last few days of Leonard Hamilton's tenure, that people don't just reflect on what's happened these last 3 or 4 years and appreciate the mess he inherited, what he built it up to, what Florida State basketball became over this last decade in stretches. And we can argue about whether or not it was as good as it should have been, but his point was he was watching FSU basketball during the Steve Robinson era, and he knows what he inherited, and that should be appreciated. And he was just saying he hopes people do appreciate that, and I hope they do too. I don't know if people will, everybody will, but I agree with the sentiment.
I agree. I think more about just appreciate the person he was and what the program was, and that it wasn't an embarrassment off the court. Because look, he inherited a mess. He made it pretty good again. Then he's created a couple messes. So it's, he's been here for so long that stuff kind of can happen sometimes. Sure. It's been up and down. It's been a little too up and down. He's had another dip. This is really his second huge dip. And this one he's not coaching anymore. So I get there's frustration with the on-court success, and that matters. He gets paid a lot of money to win games, not just graduate players. But I hope there's also a lot of attention paid to what he did try to use his job for, and he did care about academics. He would suspend these guys for important games if they didn't go to class. Like, that stuff always did matter to Leonard, and I think he was a really good ambassador for the university.
Integrity laden, for sure.
Yes,
I agree with that. Absolutely. Nate writes, are you boys and Corey looking forward to hearing how Phillips tries to spin this in Charlotte?
That'll be interesting. I guess, I'll just, they've solidified things for the short term, I guess, is what he'll right.
I'm more interested in what Alford says about it. Like, is he going to be like, we've always loved our partners in the ACC. Probably. We've always loved being in this conference. It gives me great joy to know that we get to finish out this decade, perhaps, unless something better comes along in this conference for the next 5 years.
Trailer Swift writes, gents, any word on whether or not Jim Phillips has representative from the CW present during these negotiations? I bet the GOR would have been more ironclad if Dennis ever showed up. Still one of my favorite moments. Dennis from the CW is here. Dennis.
Yeah, that's right. Dennis. Anybody seen Dennis? Any C-Dub? Tom Brenneman. Where's Tom Brenneman at?
I guess Dennis isn't here. I'm like, come on, brother. What are you doing? And then the best was the next year they had him stating very, very powerful images as he read from the teleprompter. Like, Jim, we can't be out here searching for Dennis.
Yeah, we got to move on. Let's cover some bullet points. Dennis from the CW.
Oh, no, man.
Dennis. It was still the best. Trick Noel writes, if Cassell or Laux and CY had zero FSU ties, would the beat and the fan base name them as good candidates?
No. Well,
CY would be.
CY would be. Absolutely, he would be.
I mean, if he didn't have any FSU ties, there's a million schools that have won a lot of games.
But if he recruited Florida and Georgia for the
but I'm assuming he didn't. I'm assuming he was just in the Midwest sometimes, and he's like the assistant for Baylor. Like it's not like he wouldn't be a good candidate. I'm saying we wouldn't be saying, "Hey, go get that assistant from Missouri." That's what I'm saying. Not that he wouldn't be a good candidate.
Right, but there's also the idea that if somebody named him, you'd go, "Oh, I like that." And I think
on the boards yesterday, and I've seen his name before. I can't remember it. It's Young. It's like Kamari Young, the assistant at UConn. Now that's somebody that if he had played at Florida State would be number one on everybody's list because he's been an assistant for the back-to-back national champions. Maybe he's somebody to make a run out.
But that's how the works.
That's how it works. Yeah,
it works.
As far as the question goes, I mean, I think they're. Sam Cassell's been an NBA assistant for 15 years. I mean, I don't think that's outlandish to consider him. And the whole thing about Florida State that I think is interesting that because those names came out early, and the reason, at least in some of those cases, is those people have been kind of lobbying behind the scenes. So as soon as Leonard put out the name that he was resigning, people were pushing those names out there. the pushback of people who are like, why does that have to be somebody with FSU ties? It doesn't have to be. But what I would say is this, and I'm going to write something about this, but to get somebody that doesn't understand the lay of the land of Florida State, I think is a huge mistake, because Florida State basketball is a different challenge, in my opinion, than a lot of other jobs. And so I think it's important to understand what you're getting into at Florida State. And so they don't have to have FSU ties, but I think it's not a bad thing that they do. It's not a negative by any stretch.
By the way, really quickly, just so people realize that I saw this and I wanted to take Corey's advice on this, there are at least form or fashion. Why don't we just get out of the conference and pay the there's some of that.
Yeah.
But we've already answered that.
So. Yeah, good, Jeff. There you go. Yeah, there's a lot of that. I think we've explained it well. Again, it's not the people that keep saying that. It's not y'all's money. Like, yeah, go donate $20 million. That'd make it easier for them to get out of this conference now. But again, we're not sure they have anywhere to go right now. The Big Ten presidents might not want them right now. It lines up. Their deal ends with Fox 2029, 2030. That also happens to be when Florida State is now going to be a free agent, perhaps. It's going to be a free agent before that. There is some symmetry there to when you could actually, like, the good news is there's a landing spot now. You've sued your way out of this conference. It's not happening tomorrow. It could. It's not happening tomorrow, but it's going to happen soon enough. And in the meantime, you get a runway to get to the playoffs every year.
And also around that time, the college football playoff deal is going to be coming up again. Then the SEC is negotiating a year or two after that. So there's just a lot happening at that time. That's when the time is going to be right, really.
In the final 50 seconds, Ambassador to Florida writes, gentlemen, does this agreement between FSU and the ACC not only preserve our chances to remain competitive, but put college football on the square path to a super conference, just a super conference?
It could. I mean, it definitely could. There's going to be ramifications for this. And again, that's why, from whether or not Florida State necessarily, like, if you can't bet all your money on that they're going to be in the Big Ten or the SEC, the whole thing might blow up in those 4 or 5 years. But again, for Florida State's standpoint, they're going to be making a lot more money in the meantime.
For Corey Clark, for Irish Fell, for our good buddy Ben, who was producing, and for myself, Jeff, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you. If I didn't get to your question today, please do not send a scathing email.
Please do. He deserves it.
You hurt Jeff's feelings.
Until next time, peace.